お待たせいたしました。ただいまより第6回東京グローバルダイアローグ2日目のプログラムを開始いたします。第4セッションは国際の平和と安全における人工知能です。ご登壇の皆様をご紹介申し上げます。モデレーターは当研究所軍縮科学技術センター所長の秋山信正が務めます。パネリストはヴィピン・ナラン様、中光泉様、伊藤蓮様です。ご登壇の皆様のご所属については、お手元のパンフレットをご覧ください。それでは、秋山所長、お願いいたします。
はい、ありがとうございます。Thank you very much for the introduction. One of the privileges to be an organizer of the big event is that we have a power to invite the people who I would like to listen to. So I now collected the three, the people who I really want to communicate and talk about artificial intelligence. So obviously, the artificial intelligence has attracted a lot of attention of the people, and potentially it could change, like every aspect of our life. And of course, that's not the international peace and security is not an exception. So we have been talking about, in the area of international security, we have been talking about autonomous weapon systems, how we should regulate, and how would it change the battlefield kind of tactics and so forth. But at the same time, we are also expecting the artificial intelligence could play a positive role in improving the international peace and security as well. So this panel collected the three people with a different expertise. So Vipin Narang, now professor at MIT, used to handle the nuclear deterrence in the Biden administration. So he's an expert on nuclear issues. And of course, now one of the biggest potential risk is of the artificial intelligence that people are talking about is how artificial intelligence could affect the nuclear stability, strategic stability, and how would it contribute to the arms control and as well. So I would like to maybe ask Vipin to talk about this. And Izumi Nakamitsu, obviously, I don't have to introduce to you, but she's been working at the United Nations systems for a long time and currently in charge of disarmament affairs. And now this United Nations is either a forum for the discussion how to sort of govern the emerging technologies, and also how this benefit of technology could be fairly distributed across the entire international community. So she's been tasked out by the Secretary General to actually manage all many forums talk about the emerging technologies, including artificial intelligence and biotechnology and so forth. So I would like to listen to Izumi, how international community or United Nations been tackling this challenge of the governing the technology. And finally, Ren Ito, he is also a good friend of mine, but he is a challenger establishing the company so-called Sakana AI, and I'm sure everybody knows that company. So this is possibly a unicorn on the artificial intelligence in Japan, and I had a chance in the previous year to talk with him and had a lot of exciting stories. But now, instead of him talking about the stories of his company, but I think I'd like to hear his take on what would be the appropriate sort of role that the industry could play in terms of shaping the international peace and security. So people are talking about the risks of artificial intelligence, but I think I'd like to hear from him about opportunities that we could enjoy from the other innovation. So without further ado, maybe I would like to start with hearing the Vipin's take on the relationship between artificial intelligence and nuclear stability.
Thank you, Nobu. And thank you for inviting me out to Tokyo and to JIIA for hosting the Tokyo Global Dialogues. It's an honor and privileged to be out here. In my role in the Biden administration, which I left in August, I ended up, started as a principal deputy assistant secretary, but then ended up the acting assistant secretary of defense for space policy, which included initially space policy, cyber policy, and nuclear policy. I'm primarily a nuclear person, but across those portfolios, we did so much with Japan. And in extended nuclear deterrence, the last time I was in Tokyo, at the Okura, in fact, was in July at the historic 2+2, where our Secretary of Defense and Secretary of State and your Minister of Foreign Affairs and Minister of Defense had the first public session on extended nuclear deterrence, and we've come a long way, so it's always an honor to be back in Japan. I am not an AI expert, and I won't pretend to be, even though I grew up in the Silicon Valley and spent the first 22 years of my life out there. I don't want to claim to be an AI expert, but obviously we're now in an era, particularly as it affects the Indo-Pacific, where I don't like the term arms race, but we have two domains in which we're seeing rapid expansions at the same time: AI and nuclear weapons. And I think the question that motivates this panel is how does the rapid expansion, what a week to have this discussion with DeepSeek, releasing its model and competing with OpenAI and Meta and Google in very effective ways. And I'll defer to Ren to talk about the technology and how the comparison between these models. But we're clearly in an era where we're seeing rapid advances in AI. We're also seeing rapid expansion and modernization of nuclear weapons in China, in the United States, Russia, and don't sleep on North Korea. And so what is the intersection of the modernization of these nuclear forces and AI, and what are the risks or opportunities with the marriage of these technologies? I think I can 100% say with confidence that we don't know the answer. And part of the reason is I think these domains don't speak to each other regularly, and nuclear experts are still trying to understand the opportunity and risks of AI and how it may impact strategic stability, nuclear deterrence, or even non-proliferation. So I'm generally in the camp, and I welcome pushback. I'll just say my limited and humble perspective is, I think a little is more sanguine about how AI poses risks to nuclear stability. We've had emergence of new technologies in nuclear deterrence and nuclear force postures over the last 70 years. Since nuclear weapons were invented, when new technologies emerged, maneuvering warheads, submarine capabilities, hypersonics, and the question is AI any different than these emerging technologies? Nuclear deterrence has evolved as new technologies have been developed by Russia, by the Soviet Union, the United States, now China. And the risk to nuclear stability is if there is a rapid asymmetric advantage in this given technology by one of the major powers. I think this week has shown that it is unlikely that the United States or China will have an enduring asymmetric advantage in AI, or at least at a level, if the US is 2%, 3%, 10% better than China, and we seek, the Biden administration and the Trump administration's new executive order on AI seek US domination in AI, but there are other actors. A lot of the algorithms are open source and are available, and so there's a competition in AI that I think will mitigate against an enduring asymmetric advantage. Now, an enduring asymmetric advantage in any of the technologies, whether it's maneuvering technologies or hypersonic capabilities or SSBN capabilities, may have an impact on strategic stability as it gives one great power the ability to threaten the secure second strike forces of the other. And so I sort of view AI in the lens of, another incredible technology, but a new technology that in the past have been incorporated without affecting strategic stability or creating nuclear risks. The second reason, I think, is what is AI in the nuclear domain really good for? You still have to put a weapon on target or be able to. And AI doesn't solve geography. It doesn't solve the physics of delivering nuclear capabilities or holding at risk targets over intercontinental distances. It doesn't necessarily make it faster. What it can do is improve ISR, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, and the ability to track targets, discriminate targets. But even there, where I think, there have been stories about this in the Ukraine context, where machine learning and AI have been useful is, for example, being able to help very quickly discriminate decoys from tanks in the Ukraine theater, real tanks from decoys or trucks, but it relies on a large N, on learning over time from a war that has been ongoing now for 2 years. But in the nuclear domain, thankfully, we don't have a large N. It's not as if the US or China generate forces on a routine basis that would enable sort of machine learning or AI algorithms to really improve the discrimination at a level that really gives one side an advantage. Now, I may be wrong about that, but will there be implications for that in the event of a crisis or conflict between Russia and the US, or a nuclear crisis or conflict between Russia and the US, or the US and China? Absolutely. But training the model to have this rapid advance as it has had potentially in a conventional conflict, where there are daily opportunities to improve the models and the discrimination, is not really the same in the nuclear domain. And the third reason, I think, is, as we said in the 2022 Nuclear Posture Review, the United States commits to, and China bilaterally at the end of the Biden administration agreed to, always keep a human in the loop in employment decisions on nuclear weapons. So it is not a world where there's automaticity in targeting or release of nuclear weapons. And the United States and China has committed to this. We hope Russia will as well. And that, I think, is sort of the fire break with nuclear weapons. It is any employment of nuclear weapons would be historic, momentous, world-changing. And so the United States and now China have committed to keep a human in the loop so that at no point is there automaticity in the employment of nuclear weapons. And so will AI improve areas of nuclear strategy? Absolutely. I think it'll make target identification, discrimination, and tracking better. But there will be, I imagine, relative symmetry between the great powers, and particularly China and the United States, which is, I think, going to be the nuclear competition of the future, in a way that doesn't provide an enduring asymmetric advantage to one side. And I think the same is true, for example, in hypersonics and other emerging technologies. And so I put myself sort of in the sanguine camp. This is an amazing technology that's useful for many things. My biggest fear, actually, as a professor, is the use of AI and LLMs by students to cheat on exams. I think that risk is real and higher than AI threatening nuclear stability or risk, having just lived through it in my first semester back at MIT. Times have changed. I mean, the rapidity with which this technology has really improved and the students are using it actually is changing how learning is working. And both in elementary school where my kids are and in higher education. So that is something that is rapidly evolving. But I think two things. One, we've had emerging technology in the past in the nuclear domain. And when there have been threats to strategic stability, it's when there has been sort of enduring asymmetric advantage. And I don't really necessarily see that in AI, but I'm happy to be proven wrong, or I'm not happy to be proven wrong. That would be actually a big risk. But I also think that the commitment to keep a human in the loop and responsible use of AI in these domains is really important. But I also think that it's important for those steeped in the development of AI technologies make an effort to educate those in other domains, particularly the nuclear domain, about risks that we don't necessarily see or know. And I would say most of my colleagues and counterparts have a very immature and unsophisticated understanding of AI. And so keeping, conversations like this are really important, and keeping them, I think, vibrant is also very important. So with that, I'll stop and look forward to questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think I'm right. Before the session, we discussed who should start. And then Vipin actually insisted that the Ren should start first. But I insisted that you should. And because I thought that this relationship or intersection between artificial intelligence and nuclear weapons raises so many interesting questions. So, and you did successfully raise the kind of questions. But a couple of takeaways from your talk. One, I think there is still lack of communication between two different domains, artificial intelligence and the nuclear community. So I think that's also true for various sort of sectors of the society as well. So we are probably either kind of demonizing artificial intelligence or just kind of thinking of a euphoric kind of a way of thinking about artificial intelligence. But I think we need more understanding. Secondly, you talked about this asymmetric advantage is rather short-lived. And because the machine learning really quickly kind of fill the gap, and so that is maybe also generic to the different technologies as well. So how they are going to sort of keep an investment in maintaining that technological advantage, but at the same time, the marginal utility dilemma exists. And thirdly, so as an enabler for the decision making in the nuclear command and control, I think that plays a significant role. But again, it doesn't really make a huge difference between adversaries, potentially. And then, you also finally talked about human in the loop. To me, the question is, what does human in the loop really mean? And I think we need a more elaboration about this. And finally, I 100% agree about the risk of students using artificial intelligence. I'm also always struggling whether students has used artificial intelligence whenever I read their papers. So I started to asking the question, think about the script of asking this particular question to artificial intelligence. So I try let them use artificial intelligence instead of prohibiting. But that's kind of probably nature of the technology, I suppose. So then now I'd like to ask Izumi, what are the major agendas in the multilateral forum regarding the risks and the opportunities of artificial intelligence and other technologies? So now how does UN deal with this challenge?
Thank you very much, Akiyama-san. Already very fascinating conversations. I would like to engage in this perceptions whether AI will be fully negative. We at the United Nations definitely do not believe that. In fact, in all of those conversations, we take an approach that we need to be technology neutral. Technology itself cannot be regulated, nor we should even try to regulate technology. But the use of technology will really need to involve the concept of responsibility. But getting into that, I just need to say at the outset that at the UN multilateral platform, basically everyone and all of the multilateral platforms are now looking into and having discussions, negotiations on artificial intelligence. I only get to deal with the dark side of the issues, like yourself, nuclear weapons linkage, etc. But I need to say that at the UN last year, there were two very important General Assembly resolutions, for example. One was initiated by the United States, AI for Sustainable Development. And after that, there is now a multilateral process taking place to articulate further the process led by a group of friends for AI for Sustainable Development, led by US and Morocco, I think. Another resolution that was initiated by China, AI and capacity building. And out of which there is also a process and a group of friends for capacity building related to AI, which is led by China and Zambia, I believe. So there are a whole range of discussions taking place. Security Council also discussed twice, once led by UK, and last December, one of the signature events of the US presidency was actually on the artificial intelligence issues. Even though Security Council is not a norm-making organ, it's a crisis response, crisis management body, it was very useful to really raise awareness, understanding of the risks to international peace and security. So Council is also involved. Importantly, the Summit of the Future adopted Pact for the Future. And in that, there was actually an agreement by member states. This was a member states negotiated and adopted document, and I need to use the accurate terminology. And they called for, member states called for the establishment within the United Nations a multidisciplinary independent scientific panel on AI. And we are now at the stage where I think we went through only one consultation by member states, which is led by Costa Rica and Spain. And the work to articulate what kind of a format they should be. The fourth line already is whether the scientific panel members should be fully independent or governmentally affiliated, what kind of a technical expertise level, etc. So this process is something that we need to look at, because this is the beginning of a broader discussions on what kind of governance structures the international community should have. So that work has already started. Now, coming to more of my area, dark side, international peace and security impact. Last year, the General Assembly also adopted a first committee resolution, gave the mandate to the UN Secretary General to put together Secretary General's report, which means that we have to make a recommendation on broad application of AI in the military domain. So again, this year, on the basis of national submissions from member states, we will be studying and making recommendations on what kind of norm development discussions that should take place in the UN context. So again, we are in a critical period in terms of what kind of a norm, what kind of multilateral regulations or potentially prohibitions there might be. It's up to the member states. So again, we are creating multilateral platforms to start having very important normative development discussions as well. Now, what kind of concerns that we have at the UN on the military application of artificial intelligence? I mean, obviously for the UN and many of UN member states, potential harms to civilians as a result of AI technologies widely applied to military domain and also including the weapon systems. That is a very big concern. All of the inherent risks related to AI that will be really, multiplied when that technology is used to decision-making related to use of force. I think the nuclear linkage is the biggest concern. I mean, it is true that US and China are already committed to a general principle of retaining human control. We don't we prefer to use the terminology of human oversight or human control rather than humans in the loop, which also indicates that you need to really define what you mean by humans in the loop or human oversight. The idea of machines and algorithms actually deciding on the use of force is something for us contains huge risks related to basically death, life and death decisions. Of course, there are big concerns about accountability. Legal frameworks governing the rules of law really means that humans, have to be held accountable for decisions when the decisions actually resulted in mistakes, etc. So how would that actually be addressed in terms of AI? And of course, the risks involved of non-state actors. One of the things that I really think we need to be concerned about is the blurring lines of combatants and civilians. And when the civilians or civilian actors are deeply involved in military affairs, fighting, then what does that mean for distinction between civilians and combatants? So there are a whole range of, in fact, risks associated with the military application of artificial intelligence. And all these things have to be unpacked. And really, we need to start having conversations about how to regulate possibly, and potentially how to prohibit certain types of use. And I think the nuclear pre-delegation of decision-making in the nuclear command and control really is one of those really high-end risks. And that is the reason why at least the US and China, and I think UK and France also, are generally speaking committed to that particular principle. So we are at the beginning of this conversations. The problem that we have at the UN, of course, is that while we believe that discussions on those issues have to be really done in an inclusive platform, and therefore we believe that the UN is best placed for this. However, the speed of discussions and conversations really being outpaced by the speed of development of those technologies, and application of artificial intelligence in the military domain already starting to happen. And that speed is also a very important factor. I think there are some states that believe that those norms and regulations, first and foremost, really need to take place at the national level. And how do we actually make sure that that will be elevated to a level of international agreements? How do we, I go back to the original point, what kind of overall governance framework there should be that all concerned member states should be really adhered to. So we are really at the critical phase of these conversations. The speed, inclusiveness in conversation to make sure that it will be really an effective norm is one challenging aspect of multilateral conversations that we see at the United Nations. I will stop here. There are a whole range of other issues like digital gap, how to close that gap, equitable access to those technologies for peaceful use. However, it's difficult to make sure that it's really for peaceful use because this is a dual use or multi-use technology themselves. So I think this is a new, entirely new kind of discussions that we need to have. So creativity, innovative approaches are very much called for.
Thank you very much. Yes, Izumi's the remarks gave us a lot of questions and potential inquiries that we have to address. And I think the most important point is that comparing to the pace of technological innovation, the response from the international community, particularly multilateral forum, could be relatively slow. and probably because of the importance of inclusiveness. Everybody, all stakeholders should be engaged and involved in the process, but at the same time, that inevitably takes more time. But without this engagement, I think the gap of between have and have-nots widening, and then that could really threaten the governance, my global governance in a sense. And secondly, I thought that it's interesting to maybe think about, about Japan's role, particularly in norm building. So currently in Moderator Forum, there are a lot of exercises to discuss the risks and opportunities, and also maybe how we should appropriately regulate or the shape the way how we think about using the technology. And then, personally, as one of the citizens of Japan, I would like to see how the Japanese government or Japanese industry or other should involved. So because I'm academic, so I'm kind of always thinking about the role of academics that we could play in shaping the norm, international norms. So that's a second point that I thought about. And finally, challenge for everybody, not only limited to the artificial intelligence. Now, I think international forum or platform need agility to respond to the emerging challenges, and how are we going to ensure the agility of the responses to the rising challenges. And one more thing I forgot. So both of you, Izumi and Vipin, talked about human in the loop, and that's finally lead into the human in the loop of responsibility. And who should be responsible for that? That is an important question. But at the same time, if somebody who is supposed to take a responsibility should know a lot about the technology and implications, without knowing the impact implications, they are not really are willing to take responsibilities. How we are going to inform the technology to the policymakers, that is also another challenge that I think. So then, finally, I would like to invite Ren to give some take from the industry's viewpoint, the business viewpoint. I think these are policy people, and they talked about policy, and I think technology, even though you formally are part of a policy community, so how the policy people are thinking about it. So I would like to hear what your take on about the governing this the very challenging emerging technology, artificial intelligence.
All right. Thank you so much, Nobu, for the kind introduction. And I'm so glad that you're starting this conversation with Viv and Izumi, those two of the intellectual and policy giants at the right stone. But I just wanted to throw some ideas onto the table by getting some concrete idea, how being in a foreign service for the 15 years, starting the AI company 6 years ago, started working in the AI industry 6 years ago, I want to explain what it will be the potential intersection between the artificial intelligence technology and deployment of the AI into the international security, military, the political relations. So I think starting with a casual example, as I do with Nobu always, but let's think how the artificial intelligence or even the human intelligence works. So there are two key elements. So for example, when I came here, before coming here to speak in front of you guys, I was taking a shower this morning, thinking about what to speak here. It's an idea generation. So I have to think about 5 or 6 or 7 different ideas, and to see which idea will fit the audience. How can I entertain? How can I have a productive discussion with the audience? So my shower, the first half of my shower, start with generating ideas. So let's talk about A, B, or C. And then second part of my shower is about simulating and analyzing those ideas. I will be speaking in front of the diplomats. I will be speaking in front of the academic people. Then probably idea A is not relevant. Idea B might be more thought-provoking. Idea C is so-so. So this kind of process is what we are automatically doing in our day-to-day life. This is the human intelligence. The first component is generating ideas, and then you're simulating and analyzing this. Another example. I was also worried about what kind of joke I have to tell this morning. I was calling my mom, saying that, hey, what about this joke A, B, and C? This is another thing. It's a human reinforcement learning. It's a human loop. It's not, my second part of analysis happens not just within my brain. I need to have the help of my mom. And then my mom says, neither of the joke nobody will be laughing at any of your jokes, so don't start with a joke. That's great feedback. So let me put this into the international relations or some worst case scenario. Maybe one of the extreme case scenario of applying artificial intelligence technology is wartime simulation, war game simulation, tabletop exercise. The tabletop exercise consists of the same two components. The army generals, whatever chief of staff, are generating a lot of different ideas. Everything is hypothetical, but let's take an example of Taiwan. If somebody wants to take over Taiwan, your army generals, navy generals are giving you lots and lots of ideas. What if we launch a missile? What if we occupy one of those islands in between Taiwan and the mainland? What about deploying our naval vessels to the Taiwan Strait? You know, you're coming up with hundreds of different ideas, but your limitation is human intelligence. You never come up with a crazy idea because you believe that if you're coming up with a crazy idea, it's not worth analyzing it because it's unlikely to happen. But artificial intelligence is the opposite. One of the keywords which I always use, this is a very hypothetical scenario, is banana farmers in Kaohsiung, the city that's south of Taiwan. What if China bans the import of the banana from that part of Taiwan only? This is one of the million hypothetical scenarios. No human army officer will come up with this idea because it is highly, highly unlikely that this is relevant to their operation of taking over Taiwan. But this is one of the examples that artificial intelligence is coming up with. So my question is, what's the point of having those hundreds of millions of seemingly irrelevant ideas? These ideas become relevant only if your second part, simulation is fast enough, complex enough, and the simulation can find some connection between the remote dots to which human being cannot see the connection. Again, this banana farmers in Kaohsiung, it's a totally hypothetical scenario. I don't think this makes any difference. But potentially, the banana farmers in Kaohsiung have some very, very special interest in Taiwanese politics. They can influence the key politicians. They're having a swing vote. It is affecting people's perception, blah, 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 blah. And after 100 different dots to be connected, it might end up in toppling the Taipei government peacefully. Who knows? But it is relevant only if you can do this simulation. And this step one, coming up is hundreds of millions of different ideas, which we call in the AI industry hallucination. You may have heard of this word hallucination because people usually talk about hallucination in the context of the weakness of AI. You ask some question to the ChatGPT and getting some answer which you don't like. People say, this AI is useless because this gave me an irrelevant answer. It's a hallucination. Usually it's a bad thing. But in this worst case scenario, or coming up with hundreds of different ideas, this is the strength of the AI. Now let me move on to analyzing what this simulation means. Simulation is just as I did with my mom this morning, asking my mom, how do you think about my joke? My mom said, that's horrible. Easy. But another complexity we can add to this is, let me take another example from the COVID days. Just remember 4 years ago when COVID was still in place, people are talking about a lockdown. And then people have to compare the cost and benefit. If you lock down, if you tell people to stay at home, economy goes down. So you have to strike the right balance. And then there's a whole bunch of simulation of, for example, if you decrease the frequency of the train, how do the commuters respond? Even if you don't enforce the 100% lockdown, there's a lot of different nuanced step-by-step way of restricting the human movement, one of which is decreasing the frequency of the train. So for example, Odakyu train in Tokyo, they're running every 2 minutes. What if you decrease the frequency from 2 minutes to every 10 minutes. How does that affect people's movement? Traditional simulation is only like putting 4 guys on the podium into the 4 different buckets, saying that this guy is risk averse, this guy is risk taking, this guy have a more work commitment, this guy is a family oriented person. And then we call this as a rule-based approach. You can only like put people in the similar several bucket and then simulate. Risk averse people will stop going. People with important work will still go. That's it. But by using AI, you can give hundreds, thousands of personality to the players. You can replicate entire 10,000 passengers in the train to see in their specific personality and work situation and life situation, how do they respond to this external shock that Odakyu train is running not every 2 minutes, but 10 minutes. So by having, just imagine, it's not about putting people into the 4 different buckets. You're putting people into 120 million bucket. And then you can simulate exactly how these guys will respond to this external shock. This is how this simulation of Kaoshun banana can come into place. Underneath the regular, the simulation pattern, there is no way to simulate that this one external shock is having the web of effect and having a chain effect into the hundreds of different cycles to get some result. But the strengths of the AI is not just about hallucinating ideas at a step 1, but we are extremely modernizing and making advanced simulation capabilities with the advancement of the compute capacity, with the advancement of this the agent-based approach. This is what we call the agent-based modeling. But if I connect this story to the grand scheme of the global R&D trend in the AI, hallucination is there. It's just the nature of AI. But what is extremely interesting, if you look at how the technology is about to develop in the AI space right now, is the keyword here is agent-based. And also, you may have heard of the artificial superintelligence or artificial general intelligence, but these AIs are powered by reasoning capacity and the agent capacity. If you take a look at the news these days about the DeepSeek or some amazing advancement of the ChatGPT becoming GPT-4 to 0.1, it was not just about learning knowledge. A year ago, AI became smart just because they're acquiring data. Just because they're reading data, their brain becomes smarter with the knowledge. That's the limitation of AI being smart. But starting the latter half of last year, AI started to become smarter, not just because of the knowledge, but because of the reasoning. AI started to develop itself by reasoning, by pausing for 30 seconds and thinking like a human being. These 2 keywords, reasoning and agents, are extremely instrumental in pushing the AI's capacity to the next level. And then this is the reason why you can make happen this kind of like a super simulation.
Thank you very much. So stimulating. I would like to keep on here. I want to, hear more about the logic of how the AI develops, and but here one probably the merit of artificial intelligence is that allowing the people to think about unthinkable, or maybe if people think this is impossible given the sort of common sense is prevailed, but even if the common sense prevailed, but artificial intelligence doesn't care. So they could, artificial intelligence could go beyond the border of common sense. And so that is maybe potential, opportunity that we are able to better utilize and then have a better preparedness for some contingencies, including maybe conflicts, but at the same time for the pandemic and so forth. So, hopefully I would like to see how, your company develops a model for predicting the flow of the people and, containing the risk of, spread of the disease and so forth. The other, I think you also appreciate your sharing the key, concepts in thinking about the evolution of artificial intelligence agent and the reasoning. So, contrary to the conventional understanding that artificial intelligence just, eats the data, big data, and then learn, but instead, the artificial intelligence autonomously find the reasoning. So this what's autonomy, automaticity, is the possible key for the understanding prospect of how artificial intelligence prevail. Then, actually, I'm kind of wondering if this reasoning could be different based upon different cultures. So the AI developed in the Japanese culture, Chinese culture, American culture, are they behaving differently? Do they make different conclusions? Right. So maybe if you could maybe respond to this question later on. So the second round, let me, I think I raised a couple of questions to you already, but I would like to maybe further raise the question to Vipin. Do you think that, would escalation control and AI-enabled environment be different from the escalation control under the current situation, human-led, the decision systems?
It's a good question, but again, I go back to sort of the, escalation management has been, sort of a challenge from the advent of warfare, and we've had emergent technologies throughout the course of history, and so escalation management is about leadership agency, about sort of how much application of force a president or a prime minister believes is necessary to end the conflict at the lowest level of violence. And that's essentially how I define escalation management. And I think AI is an enabler and can help, I think, for example, help prosecute more discriminately to, sort of limit the application of violence in ways that help enable escalation management. And so I see a lot of opportunity there, actually. If I think about AI in general, in sort of how it's overlaid, and I use sort of, maybe I'm over-indexing on the Ukraine conflict, where this is sort of the first, modern conflict where we've had AI integrated with, sort of in the conflict. And I think what it's done, at least for Ukraine and the West that supports Ukraine, is really enable Ukraine to more precisely apply limited resources that it has to achieve the most effective sort of wartime objective. And so by discriminating targets, it allows Ukraine to husband its limited ammunition, long-range fires, et cetera. But it also, I think, enables potential escalation management as well, because it's also discriminately avoiding inadvertently hitting targets that might result in Russian escalation. And I see it similarly with in the nuclear domain as well. And so I see opportunity. I am curious. You wanted some engagement, so Ren, I'm curious your view from industry about not just the opportunities for as AI starts reasoning, but what are the risks? And from in strategic in any domain, but in conflict domains, conventional, nuclear, space, cyber, what are some of the risks that those of us in think tanks, policy, academia should focus on? Because I see the opportunity, but I think we are, we're at least I'm unsophisticated on how to think about the risk. So that'd be helpful to, I think, elaborate on. Thanks.
Ren, can you respond?
Sure. Maybe thanks, Vivek and Nobu. I think I can combine two of your questions because it's in the same line, in the same context. No, but you mentioned that this question about how this reasoning could be culturally biased or culturally affected, and can you create positive bias which is reflecting your own culture or your own value set? And I think, Vivek, your question is also about what kind of risk we have to be aware of when we are making progress on this reasoning capacity. I think the answer is you have to give a certain personality to the reasoning process. And if I can show you this bell curve, so AI is always this bell curve. So you have a bell curve like this. It's like a bell. Even in the hallucination context, the center, the middle, 60% is a standard view. And then you have a 20% and 20% standard deviation. That's a hallucination. Same for the reasoning. When we're doing the reasoning, it's not just about one AI model do the reasoning. You're combining the results of the reasoning from hundreds of different AI models. So actually, if you're giving a prompt to whatever AI system, most likely in a complex scenario, you're not asking only one model to answer the question. You're asking the question to hundreds of different models. And then where the agent come into play is agents are maneuvering among those 100 different answers to calibrate, sorting out, and coming up with the most likely outcome which you are looking for. The point here, Vivek, is in the course of these bell curve, you can control where to strike the balance. You want the middle answer, you want the answer in the left, you want the answer in the right. And then this will be a 360 degree, this will be a 3D, so that it will be more cubic than horizontal, and then getting more cultural bias in it. And then to answer specifically your question, Vivek, about what will be the inherent risk associated with this kind of reasoning, is if you give extremely biased instruction to the reasoning capacity, that is shifting this calibration capacity to left, right, up, down, whatever.
Thank you. Actually, that reminds me of the nature of the study of international relations. We've been talking about the international relations with the assumption of a rational actor. And the rational actor should be kind of universal in shaping the utility curve. But the calibration and balancing really based upon or kind of really depends on the circumstances as well, right?
If I may jump in, just one more thing. I think this is what we were discussing over the dinner last time. But even if you deploy 3 different agents, 3 different models who are risk averse, who is risk intolerant and whatever, if your overall strategy is to strike the right balance, it is always being skewed to the middle. So it's not just about deploying the hundreds of different models, but you have to make sure that you're giving the right preference and instruction to the coordinator, which is an agent.
Thank you. And then still, I kind of thinking about that this is a situation of a nuclear decision making. So how much of the deviation can be tolerated in that kind of situation. So I think Ren and I once talked about possible usage of artificial intelligence in tracing the decision process of Cuban Missile Crisis. And I'm kind of wondering, would it make a difference in the outcome consequence of the Cuban Missile Crisis if artificial intelligence can playing the game?
Again, it's a good question and thought experiment. In general, I think I go back to, in the Cuban Missile Crisis, once it evolved and developed and it was very clear how seriously the stakes were, both Kennedy and Khrushchev had a shared interest in avoiding nuclear exchange. And I don't think any technology would have changed that fundamental preference to avoid conflict and confrontation once the missiles were discovered in Cuba and the Kennedy administration and President Kennedy had made the decision they need to be removed without starting a war. And once that shared preference, I think, emerged, I don't think there was any technology or near miss that would have gotten these 2 leaders off of that, the shared outcome that they wanted. And I think the same is true with, if you had overlaid AI, I'm not sure what would have happened, except maybe we would have discovered the missiles earlier. And it's possible, actually, that the conflict would have been, or sorry, the crisis may have been averted even earlier because, I suspect with or without AI, the sophistication of just, intelligence capability today makes it a Cuban Missile Crisis much harder to erupt. But I think that's probably independent of AI. I think the key is that in these cases, particularly when it comes to nuclear employment, it just so concentrates the minds of leaders that there's the idea that AI is going to push a leader that doesn't want to go to nuclear war into nuclear war or nuclear employment just to me seems implausible.
Thank you. Izumi, you're on the spot now. I don't want to exclude you from the discussion. So having said about these natures of artificial intelligence, I think still the decision makers see the advantage of having this technology in various ways. But the international community consists of so different countries and which have different levels of technical competencies. So how should we ensure the inclusivity in the discussion, norm building, and making sure the fairness of a fair use of those technologies, which should be the benefit should be available to everybody in the world? Then, how are we going to engage different kind of stakeholders?
Well, before answering that directly, I would like to say that you feel this way because you are United States, you are Japan, technologically advanced. But looking at the United Nations, I can definitely safely say that vast majority of member states see more risks than opportunities, benefits, when it comes to military use, general military use of artificial intelligence. And I think that is something that you really need to remember. When it comes to these kinds of issues, I think we also need to have a sense of humility. We don't know exactly what will happen. I mean, the unpredictability associated with artificial intelligence and the impact of it needs to be always kept in mind when we are, in fact, looking at a future governance framework, regulations, and policy approaches. So I need to state here that the vast majority of member states, vast majority of people actually see more risks than the opportunities, the benefits of this. So I think that's a key point. I think it's also a sort of dichotomy. I don't think we should actually look at this sort of dichotomy approach, fairness versus effectiveness. At the end of the day, when there is a governance framework and structure and the norms that all of us, all of the member states, all of us actually agreed to, it might take a little bit longer to reach that point, but when there is that, it will become more effective because you have already a buy-in. And it's actually not so different from, shared sense of risk. I mean, I often, this Cuban Missile Crisis and Kennedy Khrushchev decisions is an example that I often use these days because there was a shared sense of risk. It ended the way it did. So I think what we need to do now really is to focus on achieving a shared sense of risks and how to actually mitigate it. Here, I would really like to emphasize the importance of the IHL norms. The issues, the principle of distinction, proportionality, and the fact that all of us have a responsibility to make sure that we mitigate the civilian harm is an established norm. And I think we need to make sure that whatever happens with whatever the technologies, we need to make sure that the principle will be adhered to. That's why I emphasize in the beginning that our discussions related to regulations and norms need to be technology neutral. we need to make sure that the sense or the concept of responsibility will be really fully integrated into the discussions that we have when it comes to regulation, norms, and policies. We still have a long way to go. I think there are still quite a lot of sort of technical aspects that member states really need to go further into the depth. But these norms and what governs our society and international community really needs to be remembered and adhered to.
Right, thank you very much. I think I got too much excited, so I spent a lot of time asking questions. But now I would like to open the discussion to the floors. And then we have now only 15 minutes left. So now I would like to collect the comments and the questions first, then maybe give the panelists to respond. So, Masa Ozawa.
Thank you. Toshiro Ozawa, retired diplomat. I have a question to Mr. Ito. Is it possible to get the AI to think ethically? Is it possible to teach ethics? And I ask this because I was fascinated as a child reading Isaac Asimov's novel, I, Robot.
Thank you very much. And yes, the gentleman there.
Daisuke Tsuchiya from Brunswick Group. I was fascinated by Ren's example of the banana farmers and in Kaohsiung. But what made me think about that is it means that sort of options that seem completely crazy and out of the box can really lead to it can be a strategic decision to go after completely out of the box ideas. And then if I understood this correctly, that means we're going to see a situation where those who have the best AI can come up with the craziest ideas, and those who don't have AI won't realize that. So there's going to be a strategic gap in actually defending. And Professor Akiyama, your point around students and using AI and how do professors combat that? There's going to be a situation here of those who actually have the access to AI are going to come up with things that those who aren't. So that leads to sort of almost an AI, instead of an arms race situation, an AI race situation. So I'd like to ask the panel, how do you actually then regulate that? Do you go for quality or do you go for quantity? How is that sort of AI race in the ability to come up with the most outrageous but actually effective ideas? How does one regulate that? I'd love to hear your views. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This lady here.
Thank you very much. Safo Matsumoto from Nihon University. Yes, it's a bit similar question as a previous person. Is already in the war front. The war between Ukraine and Russia is a lot of artificial intelligence weaponry being used. And then particularly, I think it's the Ukraine point of view is obviously Russia invaded to then, and in terms of the sort of normal military capacity, is the Ukraine in inferior. So therefore, in order to making up the inferior position, the Ukraine using a lot of artificial intelligence was the warfare. So, but the question is how to fit in international sort of, particularly Dr. Nakamitsu-san's the question towards you is, for example, the war crime being strictly sort of defined in international community, like, for example, Russia committed war crime and so on. But is artificial intelligence weaponry, how actually you could regulate the war crime with the the borderline, with a war crime or non-war crime or whatever. And then because unfortunately, obviously I can see is a positive side of today's third speaker, but unfortunately there are a lot of negative downside, and then and a lot of technology is not known yet. So how to could be regulated? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, so we are approaching to the kind of time limits. Now, can you raise your hand if you have to make a comment? So now, 3 people, and I would like to close the kind of list of the questions. So that gentleman there first.
Yeah, Dan Snyder from Stanford University. I wonder if you could address the question of the effectiveness of export controls in the AI competition, particularly after the DeepSeek announcements, and whether you think export controls are not, whether they're even viable as an instrument to control the competition on AI.
Thank you. And that gentleman there?
My name is Shikata. I'm a company fellow, Mr. Company. Let me ask a question to Mr. Ito. There's an argument someday in the future, AI will have consciousness or even emotion, then AI will be almost like a human being with much superior intelligence. Do you recognize it's a risk or opportunity? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And lady here?
Saki Ouchi with Yomiuri Shimbun. One question to Professor Narang. Your man-in-the-loop commitment that was under the Biden administration, how confident are you that the current administration will keep it? Izumi, what kind of ideas does the UN or do you have to verify that human oversight is actually taking place? What sort of ideas do you have? And one to Ito-san, it's a follow-up to Ambassador Ozawa's question, but can you teach AI ethics? And can you make sure that the one with moral higher ground will prevail?
Right, thank you very much. So now I give each speaker for 3 minutes, and then maybe respond to the questions either selectively or all together, and then also would like to have your final words as well. So then I would like to ask you in a reverse order, Ito-san.
Sure, you were doing the reverse order. So thank you for all the questions. It's a very inspiring and interesting one. Let me try my best to do this. Ambassador Ozawa, your question about the ethics in an AI. I think if I may, not just but technically, but speaking about your question, there are the 2 ways to let the AI understand and implement what we call the ethics. The first one is a pre-training, and the second one is a post-training. So training means you're making an AI. So in the course of making the AI, training the model, you're giving lots of information, including information and the direction. So by giving some ethical consideration in the pre-training stage, you can influence the personality of AI, just like raising your kids. You're giving some ethos of yourself as an ethics to the AI. But after the kids is grown up, it's a post-training sphere. This is where the regulation and additional thoughts are coming into play. There are certain elements you can fix it later on, just like you're raising kids, but there are certain elements you cannot. So of course you have to prioritize what kind of consideration or the special instruction you're giving in a pre-training stage. But pre-training stage is basically a black box. So there's the pros and cons. It's more inherent to your AI system, but you cannot see the direct connection between your instruction to the outcome. But when it comes to the post-training, it is more flexible. As the time changes, as the regulation changes, as your requirement changes, you can flexibly adjust and giving specific instruction like don't talk about this, don't talk about that, don't think that way. But is that touching the deep heart of the AI? No. So that is the two different ways of educating the AI. But we have to be understanding the pros and cons and taking the balanced approach. For Tsuchiya-san, Daisuke's question, it's about this banana farming in Kaohsiung. But before answering this question about the how to mitigate this risk, one another analogy in order for people to understand, I'm not just talking about the wartime scenario, but the more general and the wider repercussion to the society is the same hallucination and analysis can be applied to, for example, the banking. So if you're organizing an M&A deal, you have to have hallucinated ideas. If you're advising, I don't know, I hope there is nobody here, but you're advising Tokyo Denryoku to TEPCO, and your advice, the boring advice is, why don't you merge with Chubu Denryoku or Kyushu Denryoku? But the hallucinated idea is, why don't you buy Orion beer in Okinawa? That's a hallucinated idea. You have to check it. So what I'm trying to say is that the repercussion of this AI hallucination and analysis does not stop at the wartime analysis border. It has a wider social repercussion. And to mitigate the risk, I think one of the way to do this, I think this is in conjunction with your point, Izumi, you mentioned about this, there will be a more risk associated with AI in the developing economies, more challenging economies. It is indeed true, but my way of adding one more thought to that statement is it will be more volatile in the emerging economies because clearly, so I was in a conference in Nairobi a few months ago, and then talking with entrepreneurs in Kenya. They're basically saying that yes, your opportunity is humongous, even bigger than a developed economy, because you can change the society without a regulation, but because of the accessibility to the AI, because of your control over the AI, you have more risk associated with that. So it is more very, very volatile. How we are mitigating those risks? I think one way of doing it is democratizing the AI. It's now the trend of developing AI is shifting from the closed source research and development by few number of companies only to the open source community. I'm not bragging about my company, but this is almost all the companies except a few big companies are developing AI in a transparent manner. You may argue that by open sourcing everything, some bad guys will be taking those technology. Yes, there is an inherent risk associated with that. But still, by open source, the model making and the data collection methodology, I think this is the most democratic way of democratizing the risk and making sure that risk will be sort of properly, more properly managed. The last question from Shikata-san about the emotion part. I think the good thing, I don't know finally if the AI has a human intelligence or human emotion, but what AI can understand now is a human perception. This is why I said, instead of checking my mom about my bad joke, you can check with an AI, because AI understands how the average people will respond to your joke. This is not the human emotion yet, but by accumulating the piles and piles and piles of those know-hows about how the human will respond emotionally to those jokes, in the end, AI might be acquiring something quasi-emotion.
Sounds like an intersubjective matter. Right. So, Izumi.
Yes. The question related to legal accountability, that's exactly one of the biggest challenges that international community actually is looking at. Who will be held accountable when decisions enabled by artificial intelligence go wrong? And that's there is at the moment no answer yet how to actually tackle this accountability framework, especially in the wartime situations. It's a big question. I think that is the reason why the concept of, I call it human oversight, is so important. Some states call it humans in the loop. Because you can't actually hold the machines or the AI, the algorithms, responsible for something that went wrong. So that's a huge concept, and that is very much at the heart of the current conversations that we're having. I didn't bring up the issue, the terminology of lethal autonomous weapon systems, because it's a questions related to autonomy, not exactly the same as artificial intelligence, but laws at the lethal autonomous weapon systems fully enabled by artificial intelligence that very question is very much at the center of conversations at the moment. I want to also mention the issue of export control. That discussions actually now migrating into the UN platform as well, whether we like it or not, and I always add, I don't like it, because we don't deal with export control issues. And there are indeed questions whether there will be effective export control measures for intangible technologies or not. I understand that there are already a lot of discussions taking place, in fact, even measures undertaken, for example, about what kind of intellectual exchanges that should be taking place or should not be taking place. But this will actually become increasingly a hot subject. Some states that bring those issues actually use not the word export control, but the transfer of science and technology. And that has a huge appeal, indeed, to the global South countries, and that is a complicating factor when it comes to. And my response always is that export control measures actually enable peaceful uses, not always just simply regulate. Verification on human oversight, we don't know at the moment. Again, how to make sure that is actually taking place. At the moment, it is a voluntary norm that is being declared by a number of states. But exactly how we might be able to verify that or not, I think there might be technical measures to verify that, but this will again also become one of the focus of discussions as well. My final word, overall remark is that, wartime rules, we do have different sets of regulations and different sets of norms. So I caution against actually generalizing those discussions for various other non-wartime discussions. I think we need to actually look at peace and security impact of artificial intelligence. It has to be really discussed in a different sets of mind, because the consequences of something going wrong is actually life and death, and we need to take that more seriously.
Thank you. Vipin.
Yeah, I'll be brief. I think Dan's question on export control is good, and it's been the way that the U.S. in particular has tried to maintain its AI edge. But the history of export controls is it can slow countries down, but it doesn't stop them. And as I think, the verdict is sought or defer to Ren on DeepSeek, but competitors figure out innovative ways to work around export controls, either violate them entirely through third countries, or perhaps the DeepSeek algorithm is more efficient and is able to run on older and fewer GPUs, and so it can slow challengers down, competitors down, but I don't think it stops them. And so it is a tool, but it is not a panacea. I think the question about human in the loop, 1,000%, I think the next administration or the current administration and President Trump persist with that because his personality is not to give up control of anything. I'd be shocked if President Trump was presented with the language that was in the 22 NPR in his future nuclear posture review does anything but say, hell yes, he's still in charge. So I suspect sort of human in the loop, which is the language that we used in the nuclear posture review, or human oversight, essentially the same thing. There will not be automaticity, and in the case of release of nuclear weapons, it is a presidential level decision, and the president, whoever he or she is, ultimately has the final call on the employment of nuclear weapons. And I think that I'm relatively confident that will persist. Final word, I think we're in a sort of uncharted territory. My personal bias is that nuclear weapons are the ultimate strategic capability, and all other technologies are essentially enablers. I think we are now in at the point where AI is developing, could AI be a strategic capability? And if so, what is the intersection between sort of nuclear forces, space, cyber, et cetera, or advanced conventional capabilities with the overlay of AI? You know, is it a force multiplier and enabler, or is it something more than that? And I think, you know, at least from my perspective, you know, have the humility to be open-minded about sort of the development of this technology and its intersection with military capabilities. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. What a great discussion we had. And obviously, as you know, comparing to before we have a session, we have more things that we have to address and think and learn. But one thing which I thought be important is that learning about artificial intelligence is learning about human beings and human intelligence. I think, you know, if we have a better, fair, and effective use of artificial intelligence, we ourselves have to improve our capacity to manage the technology and to have a better sort of ways of thinking as well.
The ultimate test will be an AI replaces therapists.
So my apology for the mismanagement of time, but I know that you have many questions, but it's time to close the session. So thank you very much, and let me, would you join me in thanking the excellent panelists?
モデレーターの秋山所長、ありがとうございました。ご登壇の皆様に今一度拍手をお願いいたします。